Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. Kicking off a new week with a brand new theme. This is our final genre theme for a little bit. We're going to be exploring indie rock. Kicking it off with a band that we've had on the channel before. We're looking at Built to Spill. The track title is I Would Hurt a Fly. And I think that's kind of funny. Alright, let's dive in and see what Built to Spill is bringing to the table today. Very narrow sounds. Ooh. Narrow on the drums, but the guitar is pretty large. I'm hooked for some reason. Still trying to figure out why, but this is right up my alley. Ooh. I like how the guitar and the vocals are in the same general range. But they're not playing the same thing. I didn't finish that thought. Yeah. So many things going on, complementary of each other. That last section was wild. Both guitars doing their own thing against the vocals. The counterpoint was a combination of both guitars simultaneously, though. I'll have to get into that later. So we do have a bass in the background, but we also have a cello. It's kind of a rigid rhythm, but it's working. A very noisy ending to this track. Doesn't feel out of place, but is a fair bit different from most of the rest of the track. Yeah, it's interesting to hear this in perspective of everything else. There's a lot of stuff in here that feel very familiar to me. It's just presented in a way that isn't. The sounds of the instruments, sort of the structure of it all. It makes me think that a lot of the sounds that I like were influenced in part by this band, or maybe whoever influenced this band. That there's some sort of lineage here. This is not something I think I would have thought I would have liked if it were described to me. But the end result is very pleasing to my ears. Has a little bit of grunginess to it, but also like the indie mid-fi fuzziness, and a little bit of Mars Volta, but like Mars Volta. No, I'm kidding. No. The side of Mars Volta that I enjoy, though, little noisy, little chaotic, but controlled post-hardcore style of stuff. Even the vocal melody feels familiar to me. I'm curious how many bands that I like listen to Built to Spill before making the music that they made. I don't know. It just there's so many points of familiarity in this track. It kind of blows my mind. One thing that I really love about this is that there's rarely a dull moment. Even in the slower verse and chorus that we have, each time we get to the verse, there's new instrumentation, there's new melody, there's new rhythm, there's new stuff in it. If you don't like what's happening in one moment, wait 16 bars, you're going to find something new. This is put into even further effect in our final 2 minutes or so of the track, our extended jam session. It's not a jam session, it doesn't feel like to me, but like there's not the vocals are completely removed and it's a bunch of instruments trading off solos. Feels kind of jammy, even though it's not jam music, if that makes sense. It's an extended solo section. I'll go with that. Maybe that's a little clearer. This section certainly leans into that. Instruments are constantly changing what they're doing. We have a rotating display of instrumental solos. We have a lot of timbres being presented in here. The production seems to favor different things at different times. If you're not enjoying something, give it a moment. Something else is going to come in. It's not stagnant at all. This track is just always pushing forward to the next new idea, and that feels good to me. I would much rather something move too fast than for it to feel like it's overstaying its welcome. I can always listen to a track again if I need to pick up on something else, if I need to get more acquainted with some sections that went by in a blur. I can't fast forward a track. I mean, I could, but that's rude. So, yeah, for me, especially on a first time listen, whether it's casual or critical, I'd much prefer something move too fast. And this certainly gets in that direction. Things are just constantly changing, and it ends up working well. I think it creates an intensity, a motivation to progress. Sometimes I think it might even be a motivation to perfect. It feels like every time something new is added, it's done so in a way to embellish on something that was already there. Not to drastically change what it is, but to recontextualize it, possibly to find a more perfect version of it. I don't know if anybody else gets that. I don't know if that's the intention, but that's sort of the feeling I get. They start with the foundational idea and then add layers and add layers until, it feels like they're pushing towards the final version. And you just never really get there because there's always something else to add to it. That's pretty neat. I dig all the contrast, the constant movement, and the evolution of ideas throughout this track. During the chorus, I mentioned Counterpoint. This is going to be a little tough to talk about because it's not standard counterpoint. For those who don't know, counterpoint or counter melody is when you have multiple melody lines in the lead element at one time. In this case, during the chorus, we have the vocals front and center, and we have two guitars off on the side doing their own melodies. All of this is competing for the listener's attention. Here's the thing though, both of the guitars individually aren't doing anything incredibly complex or in depth. They both are melodious, but I don't know if I would call either a lead melody. What's interesting though is when you listen to both of them combined and you allow them to form a single idea, it creates a really strong counterpoint to the lead vocals in the chorus. It's counterpoint by way of, I don't know if there's a musical term for this. Technically, I think we would call it a Hocketed, and that's when multiple ideas come together to create a singular idea. But I don't know that this was done with a Hocketed in mind. That is to say that a Hocketed usually, I don't know if this is a hard rule or if this is just something that usually happens, but there's no overlap in a Hocketed. So maybe you have a flute who plays a note, and then a clarinet who plays a couple notes, and then a trumpet who plays one note, and then a trombone who plays three notes, and it creates a melody across the spectrum of sounds because the melodic line itself bounces between them, but there's no overlap. You don't ever hear two of the instruments simultaneously. They are literally, well, figuratively, I should say, passing the baton from one instrument to the next. I'm going to play a couple, you're going to play a couple, you're going to play a couple, and together it's going to make, a melody. Here, though, both guitars are going off at the same time doing their own thing. It's just that when I heard both of them together and forced their sounds to combine, that's when it created something very cool. There was still overlap, but the two of their less complex lines formed together like Voltron to create a very complex line that went very well with the lead vocals and created this phenomenal counterpoint. I really liked that first chorus. I don't remember if this happened in the second chorus. There was certainly guitars around the vocals, but I was paying attention to some other stuff, so it probably was the same thing since it's another chorus. But it's possible that this exact thing didn't happen there. It did in the first. I caught on to it. I was amazed. Jaw was on the floor. Just a wonderful moment, especially when you bring in the rhythmic complexities in the drum. A lot of the drumming is straightforward metronome style, but there are every like 4 bars, the drummer's got to throw this really sick fill in. Just something to spice things up. Again, contrast and keeping things evolving and moving. And in these moments, the rhythmic complexity between the Hocketed of the guitars and the drums coming in fit so perfectly around the rhythmic ideas in the vocals, and then the vocals, melodic ideas bouncing off the guitar. It was just, it's such a great chorus. It really is. To me, it's the highlight of the song. That first chorus is just everything to me. And so I found it really interesting when we came out of it, went back to the verse, and well, I found this to be quite interesting too. You see, we return to the verse, but it's not the same verse we had. Once again, things have to be changed. There's a constant movement towards the next thing. And here we introduce, I think, the cello. I know we heard the violin in the first verse. I don't remember hearing a cello. And it was peculiar to me because here I was like, oh, dang, I haven't been paying much attention to the bass. The chorus was like all melody for me. That's all I really cared about. Let me check in on what the bass is doing. And I heard the bass. So a lot of root tones with some nice leading passages to bring us to the next root tone, stuff like that. Not entirely basic ideas, but nothing super complex either. Just some pretty standard, nice bass lines above the norm. And then there was another low instrument down here. It was a cello. What? They have a bass and a cello. That's unusual, especially since the cello never came back. We had the cello in this verse. I don't remember hearing it in the chorus, and it in the violin were both missing from the extended solo section at the end. They had these bowed string instruments for the verses specifically, and the cello for the second verse specifically. It was very cool. I liked what they were doing here. The extra timbre, the warmth of these instruments, I think felt really well. Think the warmth of the instruments went very well with as contrasting the sort of coldness that the rest of the instruments were bringing. And it's not necessarily that the instrumental timbres were cold, because I think we have an acoustic guitar in here, which brings a little bit of warmth, but it's the way that they're EQ'd and engineered. The song doesn't really feel warm to me until the cello and violin come in. This is where it begins to have, I don't know, a homeliness to it. It feels comfortable, whereas everything else just feels familiar. It's a perfect match. I love having these instruments in here, and of course the added complexity works well. That doesn't necessarily mean that just throwing this in there was something that was going to work, but that whoever composed this, I don't know, it could be the whole band project, it could be that they have a dedicated music writer in the group, I don't know. They understand complexity of layers. They know how to fit instruments in, they know how to tweak them to play around what everything else is doing, and their mixer does a great job of keeping everything spacious as well, ensuring that nobody steps on anyone else's feet. It is a massive undertaking to get that second verse right. And I think that they nailed it. Lots of cool stuff going on in there, and they added 2 more instruments and just found room for them despite it already being a pretty cluttered track overall. The ending of this track takes us to the big extended solo section, and this is just, it is a blast to listen to. It's interesting though, because given the influence that we've heard on the song up until now, I wouldn't really expect blues slash hard rock, early rock stuff being an influence that this band has, and yet we get to this section and it's filled with these hard rock style guitar licks. It's filled with this spacious, melodically driven, well paced series of solos coming from the guitars. and it's weird, but it's such a blast because it's my type of solo. There isn't really a lot of shred in here. There isn't a lot of 4-bar blocks. It's I play a line and then I'll take a little break. Then I play another lick, and I'll take a little break. Then play another lick. This one's a little longer than the other ones. It feels very jazzy in that regard, but with a little bit more longevity to the ideas, given that this is a string instrument and doesn't necessarily have to take breaths to play on it. So there isn't a physical barrier to playing shorter ideas. It's just what the guitarist does. And so we have this entire song that feels kind of grungy, mid-fi, indie rock kind of vibes, a little bit of Midwest emo stuff going on with the vocal lines. And then out of nowhere, these hard rock guitar solos at the end of the track. And it's just, how did all of this come together? I really love it. We've checked out Built to Spill before. I don't think off of this album, though. Maybe. And I'm pretty sure I enjoyed them then, but this just solidifies the fact that I need to check out more of them. Let me hit some lyrics right here, and then we'll wrap this one up. On the surface, it's about being upset at a fly, at least in some parts of this anyways. The idea of the first verse says, I can't get that sound you make out of my head. I can't even figure out what's making it. No one else around even seems to be noticing. It's only small enough for me. Like when you hear a fly buzzing nearby, no one else can hear it. You can. It's really annoying. Sometimes you don't even know where it's coming from. You just hear it. It's in your vicinity. But as per the annotations, it's actually about guilt. The sound is the feeling of guilt. It's your conscience telling you, hey, you should feel bad about what you did. All of this wraps up into the chorus, which has the double line in it, the double entendre, because I'd hurt a fly. Bringing back the idea of a small winged mosquito buzzing around you incessantly and you wanting to hurt it, but also taking that on the secondary level of you're not as meek as people think you are. You have, as the first line says, a mean bone in your body. So this person isn't great. He absolutely, maybe he doesn't enjoy, but he wants to bring harm on people. He would hurt a fly. You know, the exact opposite. This person's so nice they wouldn't even hurt a fly. This is the opposite of that. He's mean. He would hurt a fly. He's got a mean bone in his body. He'll do mean things to you. And there's guilt in that, especially since people can't see it. No one else seems to notice this. He looks unassuming on the surface, but he is darkness within. That's what the song is about. And so the end of the track makes a little bit more sense. I never quite figured out why we had this extended solo section with all the distortion and amplification after a generally calm-ish indie rock track. But I think that's what it's about. It's about darkness bubbling up underneath the surface. It's about a loud, noisy part of a quiet idea. It's what lies beneath the surface being different than what is above the surface. And so this song is quiet in a lot of places, but noisy and rambunctious in others. It creates the duality that you have to get further into the song to find. Yeah, really nice way of creating a parallel between those two ideas. Those are my thoughts on I Would Hurt a Fly by Built to Spill. Let me know yours down in the comment section. Give me your thoughts, perspectives, and opinions. Anything else you want to add? Maybe you want to correct me on something I said or add on to a topic I brought up. Put all that stuff down in our comment section. You know the jail. I was going to say you know the drill, and I was going to say you know the jam, and that's kind of a weird one. So I ended up saying you know the jill. That doesn't make any sense. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to the special selection submissions as well as a link to Linktree. This place has a bunch of stuff in it. Links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, so much more. Just awesome stuff in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for this one, but we do have a special selection coming up next. It's Autechre for those electronic fans. I don't know what I'm in store for. Those guys make some interesting music. If that's not your cup of tea, though, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.